There was something on the shoe cabinet, a Mashimaru sticker. This was one of the last clear memories she had from that night of terror. 2 women were brutally murdered. One survivor barely escaped with her life. In that unfamiliar place, hiding in fear, she saw a cheerful white rabbit sticker, an image that would haunt her forever. That character sticker turned this case into what we now call the Shinjeongdong Mashimaru incident. 2 murders, 1 miraculous escape, and a killer who was never caught. Tonight, we trace the story of those dark days and the ongoing investigation that continues to this day. June 6, 2005, Memorial Day morning in Seoul, South Korea. In Shinjeongdong, Yangcheon District, there was a spot beneath an elementary school wall where residents often dumped their trash illegally. It looked like any other morning, but that morning, something caught the eye of a sanitation worker. A rice sack sitting among the usual debris. It looked ordinary enough, but it felt unusually heavy. When he touched it, it was cold and something solid was inside. Suspicious, he called the police immediately. When officers arrived and untied the rice sack, the scene froze everyone with horror. And what they discovered would haunt the investigators for decades to come. It wasn't just one rice sack, there were 2. Inside were the remains of a woman in her late 20s. Her upper body was covered by one sack from head to waist, while another covered her lower body from the legs up, with her legs forcibly bent. Her body had been bound with meticulous precision. The rope work wasn't loose or haphazard. It was expertly tied, as if someone had practiced these knots many times before. The binding was so precise that it created handles, making it easy for a single person to carry the heavy sack. But the most disturbing aspect was the condition of the body. The victim had been cleaned meticulously, almost as if she had been prepared for burial. Yet evidence of violent assault and sexual crimes remained. The victim had left her home the previous afternoon, suffering from cold symptoms, heading to a pharmacy for medicine. Based on the autopsy findings, her breakfast was still undigested in her stomach. The time between abduction and murder was relatively short. The autopsy revealed bite marks on her chest and horrific evidence of sexual violence. Her underwear was twisted, as if it had been removed and then put back on. 2 sanitary pads and tissues had been shoved into her body. While the signs of sexual assault were clear, no semen could be detected to identify the perpetrator. And the location where the killer dumped the body, it was right beneath an elementary school wall, in a spot where anyone could see it as they passed by. So this wasn't about hiding the crime. It felt like a taunt directed at the world. I can do this and still not get caught. It was as if the killer was making that exact statement. The first case began with traces that were both brutal and bizarrely meticulous. Before the shock of the first case had even faded, another tragedy struck just 5 months later. November 20th, 2005, a Sunday and public holiday. 40-year-old Ms. Lee went out and never came home. Her last confirmed sighting was on the escalator CCTV at Shinjeong Station, heading home after what appeared to be an ordinary day. That was the last trace of her alive. The next day, another horrific discovery was made. Her body was found at an illegal garbage dump site in a residential area, just 1.8 kilometers from where the first victim was discovered. This time, instead of rice sacks, the body was wrapped in a camping mat and multiple layers of plastic. The entire package was bound tightly with rope and electrical wire. The knots were far from haphazard. They were precisely tied to create handles, as if crafted by a professional with extensive packaging experience. The autopsy results were even more shocking. The cause of death was identical to the first victim, death by neck compression and asphyxiation. But her ribs were fractured and her entire body showed signs of blunt force trauma. Additionally, she showed the same retroperitoneal hemorrhaging as the first victim. The methods and results were chillingly similar. And an even more bizarre clue emerged. Mold was detected on the victim's clothing around the torso area, but this wasn't naturally occurring mold. Forensic experts determined the mold hadn't grown naturally but had transferred from an enclosed space, like a basement. This meant the killer hadn't simply murdered and immediately disposed of the victim, but had kept her in a specific location for some time, and that location was likely underground somewhere, hidden from public view. Why did the killer again deliberately dump the body at a garbage site near the victim's home, where people regularly passed by? This wasn't about concealment. Criminal psychologists say it appeared to be about flaunting his presence. These two cases made it undeniable that this wasn't random violence, but a calculated series of murders by the same perpetrator. Two cases just 5 months apart, less than 1.8 kilometers between dump sites. The investigation team immediately focused on the possibility that these were committed by the same perpetrator. But early in the investigation, opinions were sharply divided. The first victim was a young woman in her 20s. The evidence of sexual violence was clear: bite marks on her chest and evidence of sexual humiliation in her lower body. The second victim was a woman in her 40s. There was no evidence of sexual assault, but instead severe beating that had fractured her ribs. Both victims died from neck compression asphyxiation, but the nature of the attacks differed. Some investigators believed they couldn't be the work of the same perpetrator. But other detectives couldn't ignore the bizarre similarities connecting the two cases. First, both victims were found with their clothes neatly arranged and their bodies unusually clean, as if they had been washed and prepared for burial. Second, the binding methods. The knots weren't simply tied. They were engineered to create balanced handles so a single person could transport the heavy bodies. Rope, electrical wire, camping mat, different materials were used, but the precision of the knots was eerily similar. So investigators analyzed it this way. This was the work of someone who regularly practiced binding or packaging. This was not the work of an amateur. But the clues stopped there. No fingerprints or DNA evidence was found at either scene. Only bags, mats, electrical wire, common materials available anywhere. This was also a time with limited CCTV coverage, so the victim's movements after disappearing were completely untraceable. Only one bizarre clue remained: the mold found on the second victim's clothing. Evidence that she had been kept in an enclosed space like a basement before being dumped. This meant the killer had a separate hideout where victims were held, but this location was never discovered. The two cases left investigators confused with conflicting theories and ambiguous clues. The perpetrator seemed to have vanished without leaving a single mistake. It appeared to be the perfect crime. May 31st, 2006, local election day, a peaceful public holiday when the entire country was in a festive mood. That afternoon, while most people were going to vote and enjoying their day off, a woman named Miss Park was taking a taxi to meet a friend at the Mokdong 5-way intersection. But while absorbed in a mobile phone game, she missed her destination and ended up at Shinjeong Station. When she realized her mistake, she hurriedly got out of the taxi and started walking toward Mokdong. And that is when a strange man approached her and said in a low voice, "Just come with me for a minute." When she ignored him and quickened her pace, she felt something cold and sharp press into her side. A box cutter. The man pressed a blade against her ribs and whispered, "Follow me quietly, scream, and you're dead." Miss Park cried out in terror and struggled. Passers-by turned to look at the situation. But the perpetrator calmly smiled and made an excuse. "My girlfriend had too much to drink during the day, and she's drunk. Don't worry about it." Whether the passers-by believed him or not, no one helped her. And in that moment, Miss Park felt completely abandoned by the world. She was eventually dragged to a semi-basement apartment in Shinjeong. As soon as the door closed, the TV and radio volumes were turned up to deafening levels. The floor was scattered with numerous ropes, and a large saw lay casually in the corner of the room. From the darkness, another man looked up and said briefly, "You're here?" That single phrase confirmed the existence of an accomplice, and her blood ran cold. Just as the perpetrator sat in front of her and started to lower his pants, he suddenly said, "I need to use the bathroom," and left the room. That brief absence was her only chance. Miss Park mustered all her strength and ran to the front door. But instead of rushing directly outside to the street, she went up the stairs to the upper floor and crouched behind a shoe cabinet in front of someone's apartment. Her heart was pounding like it would explode, and she covered her mouth, afraid her breathing would give her away. Footsteps grew closer. The perpetrator came out cursing, carrying the saw, shouting, "If I catch you, you're dead." The footsteps moved away and then came back repeatedly. With each sound, her heart seemed to stop. At that moment, what caught her eye was a small flower pot placed on top of the shoe cabinet. It looked crooked and handmade, like a child's craft project. And on the side of the shoe cabinet was a Bashimaru sticker, that distinctive white rabbit character with its mischievous grin. That expression, which should have been cute and innocent, became sinister, burning into her vision as a memory she would never be able to erase. Shortly after the perpetrators returned to the semi-basement, Miss Park ran frantically. When she saw a nearby elementary school, she finally collapsed and took out her phone to call her boyfriend. With trembling fingers, she managed to make that one call, the lifeline that would prove her survival. This miraculous escape became the final recorded incident in the Shinjeongdong serial case and remained as the testimony of the sole survivor. But the clues she could remember about the perpetrator's hideout were limited to just two things: the semi-basement apartment and the Bashimaru sticker attached to the shoe cabinet on the floor above. From this point on, people began calling this case the Shinjeongdong Bashimaru incident. Other than that, there were no DNA, fingerprints, or other forensic evidence recovered from any of the three crime scenes. And the perpetrator, as if sensing danger, disappeared without a trace shortly afterward. No similar incidents occurred in Shinjeongdong after this kidnapping attempt. The perpetrator or perpetrators likely fled the area immediately after the third incident, when they realized there was now a surviving witness. And just like that, the case went cold. A full 10 years after the crimes, in October 2015, SBS's investigative TV show Unanswered Questions featured this case. Immediately after the broadcast, an internet user posted a shocking message. About 10 years ago, I was delivering pizza in Shinjeongdong and went to a 2-story house with a Bashimaru sticker. And he also posted a street view photo. And what made this tip significant was that the street view photo he posted was actually from 2013 and showed the same 2-story building where the victim had hidden. Moreover, in front of the building, the photo captured a handcart for transporting banners with rice sacks on it and an electric wheelchair. These were bizarrely connected clues that aligned with expert speculation. First, the banner transport handcart. Experts had theorized the perpetrator worked with ropes and banners based on the precise knot tying skills, and the electric wheelchair. Experts on the broadcast speculated that the perpetrator might be someone with physical disabilities. This theory arose from the meticulous rope binding that suggested someone experienced but possibly with mobility limitations. But this tip was quickly deleted. Internet users became worried that it would be terrible if the perpetrator actually saw it, and suggested deleting the post and reporting to police instead. The production team then made the post private. Later, the production team stated that the tip was unrelated to the case, to prevent secondary harm to residents who might be wrongly suspected based on mere speculation. But the truth remained shrouded in fog. As public interest waned, police made an unexpected announcement. In December 2015, a formal reinvestigation was decided. A dedicated team of violent crime detectives was formed, and they requested the National Forensic Service to reanalyze bodily fluids found on the camping mat that had wrapped the 40-year-old victim. While the technology of the time couldn't extract anything useful, advances in genetic analysis technology over the previous decade offered hope for new clues. Police also focused on another possibility, Byung Byung-seok, the perpetrator of the Cheonan serial murders. He had used similar methods to the Shinjeongdong cases, including wrapping victims' faces in black plastic. Police began re-examining his crime patterns to see if there might be any connection to this case. In July 2019, the Unanswered Questions YouTube channel released shocking testimony they had kept secret for years. This was the testimony from the actual resident of the house with the Mashimaru sticker. The sticker was put there by my first child, who was just 3 years old at the time. The flower pot was also made by the child. A man in his late 30s lived in the semi-basement as a monthly renter. Sometimes there would be 2 men living there together. He moved out before my second child was born, sometime before October 2006. He said he worked somewhere in Kurodong. This testimony provided crucial clues to the case. It supported the possibility that the perpetrator was actually a 2-person team and backed up the theory that they fled immediately after the third incident. Then in January 2020, the same show aired a follow-up episode after 5 years. A new witness came forward, Kang Min-seok, which is a pseudonym, who had worked part-time cutting cable TV lines after being discharged from the military. Kang vividly recalled visiting a multi-family housing unit in Shinjeongdong in September 2006. It was a black iron gate. While I was working, I rearranged a flower pot on top of a shoe cabinet on the second floor, and I confirmed there was a Mashimaru sticker on that shoe cabinet. A man wearing a deliberately pulled-down hat came out of the semi-basement, and inside his house, ropes were scattered all over the floor. Kang's testimony matched survivor Miss Park's memory with shocking accuracy. A residential area in Shinjeongdong, a black iron gate, the house on the right of the 2 semi-basement units, past the iron gate, numerous ropes seen inside the house, a shoe cabinet on the second floor, the Mashimaru sticker on that shoe cabinet, and a flower pot presumably made by children. The production team conducted hypnosis investigation with Kang. Under hypnosis, Kang gave even more specific testimony. He had a masculine appearance and looked fierce. That person left and someone else came. He looked different. He even took off his hat and asked for wire. He said he lived in that house. He looked funny. His eyebrows were drawn like seagulls. This matched the survivor's testimony that there might be an accomplice. She said she also heard someone else's voice. But one thing to note here is that according to recent testimony from the detectives who handled the case, it's possible that the victims' or witnesses' memories may have been distorted, and they're keeping open the possibility that it was a single perpetrator, rather than a 2-person team. They said that the second voice could potentially be explained by the loud television or radio sounds, voices from neighboring units in the thin-walled multifamily housing, memory conflation under extreme stress, or echo effects in the basement environment. And more crucially, the cable worker witness initially said he only saw 1 man at the house, but only remembered a second person during later hypnosis sessions. So with all possibilities open, based on the cable worker's testimony, a suspect's composite sketch was created. After the composite sketch was released, unexpected news came from Busan. Inspector Chung Woo-jung of Busan Kijang Police Station focused attention on a 2-person robbery and a rape team arrested in 2008. These 2 men, Chang and Bae, had similar appearances to the composite sketch, and more importantly, one of them had lived in Shinjeongdong. The production team tracked them down and visited Bae's house, and what they witnessed was shocking. Red ropes were scattered throughout the house. When the production team asked, "Did you work with ropes a lot?" Pei replied, "I do electrical work, so I collected and sold a lot of wire to scrap dealers. I've brought sacks too. I needed them to carry the wire." However, Pei actively denied any connection to the case, saying, "I hate semi-basements." During the investigation, connections to several similar cases were also raised. Most notably, the December 8, 2016 Incheon Bupyeonggu Gulpocheon sack murder and body disposal case. The method of binding the body with rope before putting it in a sack, and the way the body was wrapped in plastic bags, and dumping the sack at an illegal waste site near furniture stores were all very similar to the Shinjeongdong case. Connections to the Yeongdeungpo 노들길 murder case are also being examined. Some experts theorize that the means of body disposal was a handcart rather than a car. This theory gained credibility because the body disposal sites weren't very far away, and based on the type of knots used, mountaineering experts speculated the perpetrator collected scrap metal or waste paper, which is usually done with a handcart. The connections and speculations remain rampant, and while the investigation is still technically open, no new clues have emerged to point to a definitive suspect. Seoul's Yangchun police station continues to accept tips from the public, hoping that even the smallest lead could break the case. 2 women lost their lives in eerily similar ways, and one miraculously survived, yet the perpetrator was never caught. Rice sacks and camping mats, precise knots, meticulously cleaned bodies. And that Bashimaru sticker stuck on the old shoe cabinet above the semi-department, watching silently over it all. 20 years have passed, but new testimonies and advances in forensic technology keep hope alive. There is the testimony of the original resident, the cable worker's eyewitness account, and the long-suspected 2-person team. All of these fragments seem to point somewhere, yet the identity of the perpetrator remains shrouded in mystery. And so the search continues. The Shinjeongdong Mashimaru case remains one of Korea's most enduring mysteries, proof that even the most ordinary suburban streets can conceal unspeakable secrets. With every new witness, every new DNA test, investigators still hold on to hope that one day justice will finally be served. Until then, Bashimaru's smiling face continues to haunt not only the lone survivor, but an entire nation still waiting for answers. That is all for today. Thanks for watching.